Okay, great. We'll get started. So welcome everyone to this Disability Public Lab talk with Dr. Aki Kato, who has been a postdoctoral fellow visiting us in the School of Disability Studies and the Office of Social Innovation. He's a fellow sponsored by the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science. Based in Tokyo suburb, which is one of the birthplaces of disability activism in Japan. Aki's work focuses on the genealogies of disability activism, drawing on disability archives, community-based research, and critical disability studies. While here in Toronto, he's been translating the book Feminist Queer Crypt by Alison Kafer. He's doing that with a group of translators, bringing together theory, history, and activism. He's paving the way to reimagine disability politics and accessible futures. I'll also say on a personal note, it's been such a joy to have Aki with us. What a buoyant spirit and just a delight to have around. Wherever we go, whenever I talk to Aki, he says, "Oh yes, I was hanging out with my friend." I don't know how he's managed to make so many friends in 6 months, but I do know because he's such a delight to be around. And Aki, I think your dedication to recording and thinking with disability culture is inspirational. Your love of Toronto is infectious, and we really look forward to having you back. I think, truly feel like you're, an integral member of our community, and we'll miss you greatly. But look forward to your return. You always have a home here in Toronto. I'd also like to begin with a land acknowledgement. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory, and the Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, as well as Europeans and all newcomers, have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. As our speaker invites us to think about today, how Aki invites us to think about today and about the challenges and the processes of building genuinely non-extractive research relationships, we also might be able to reflect on the Dish with One Spoon teaching. Haudenosaunee scholar Darren Scott Thomas describes applying one dish, one spoon in Indigenous research methodology as grounded in relationality, responsibility, reciprocity, and care for what is shared, while demonstrating a commitment, understanding, and respect for Indigenous ways of knowing. A couple of access notes before we get started. The live captions are on. We're inviting in remote participants. We have ASL interpretation on the screen. If you're using ASL, please indicate that to us if you're having trouble accessing it. This is a relaxed, informal space. There's food, vegan snacks and gluten-free snacks and all kinds of snacks. Feel free to relax in the space, get up, move around, eat, go to the washroom. The washrooms are out the door, and if you just kind of walk straight on there to your right, there are women identified washrooms. There's an accessible all gender washroom. If you go out and turn left, and then upstairs, there are men's specific washrooms as well. For those joining online, if you have trouble hearing, please let us know and we'll adjust the owl or the microphone, and particularly to the interpreter if you have trouble hearing, just let us know in the chat. I think those are all of our access notes. So I'm pleased to turn it over to Aki to share space with us. Thanks, Aki.
Hi. So I'm Akihito Kato from Tokyo. Yeah, actually, so Eliza describes everything about me and today's presentation. But one thing, the secret, just to make friends is I always say, I'm really nervous. I really need your support. Yeah, it's really true. And it does apply to today's my presentation. But I'm really happy to be here. But we have a lot of friend, a new friend is supporting me, who's gonna support me. I really appreciate it to take your time. And also, I add a little bit of context. I mean, when I sent study to this title, Disability Crisis toward the Critical Imagination of Disability Politics, I had something bad feeling like something bad gonna happen, but I didn't expect that the war. I mean, now we have American and Israeli war against Iran is happening. I never imagined that but I feel some kind of responsibility to do kind of something small that push against this situation. Of course, I'm really small. I don't have actually answer, but I hope this time can be a place we share some stories, or we can do, or we can think about this situation. Yeah, we don't have answer, but we can share some more. That is my hope. And I hope it is really important. That is my. So I do my presentation. Doesn't work. Oh, there's time lag. So before I start presentation, I will now explain some of the background of titles. Actually, TMU's Office of Social Innovation and with Eliza for the film screening event on December 3rd, which is International Day of People with Disability. And the film is named Bodies in Crisis and by Maria Teresa Lerain. And Maria Teresa learned film in TMU, and Maria Teresa also learned disability studies here. So, and the movie is about documentary of constitutional election in Chile. Here in slide, I have excerpt from the description of movie, so I will read it out. So in the midst of a profound social conflict, Maria Teresa Larin, an activist and filmmaker based in Canada, returns to her native Chile to document 5 activists who embark on a transformative process to dignify their lives. Bodies in Crisis follows these activists through the constitutional process that took place in Chile between 2020 and 2021. The film powerfully traced the intersection of gender, disability, and indigeneity in ongoing struggle for disability rights and justice. I think if you put the Bodies in Crisis and TMU on Google, maybe you can find the event information. You can see, I think, trailer of the movie. I really recommend it. But anyway, as a movie, the title is Bodies in Crisis, and my presentation is gonna be about disability activism and disability studies. I just said, disability in crisis in this presentation. And also at this Japanese context, actually I arrived to Toronto in 10th of October, and I have to leave on 10th of March. So it's about 5 months, but I mean, after I arrived to Toronto, the we got a first female prime minister, Sanae Takaichi, in Japan, but she's a female prime minister who is super right-wing person. So I never imagined that, but yeah, this is the situation. And also, in the beginning of this February, there was a House of Representative election, and through which the leading party, actually, the name is Liberal Democratic Party. Actually, it is super right party, but anyway, the leading party got 2/3 of diet member. So, I mean, number 2/3 is really important because, if you have over 2/3 of the member in the diet, so maybe constitution can be changed because, the diet can start a kind of asking people in Japan to, which is, if we choose or if we choose to change it or which not choose it, they can ask me. And the Japanese constitution have several issues, but the main thing is that the constitution can be changed, but including Article 9, meaning renouncing land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential. Of course, I would say Japan has a kind of military, but they say officially it's not a military, but self-defense forces. That is the situation. But anyway, I'm just feeling a little bit fair. And also, I'm just kind of draw a kind of global context. And that is, I don't I don't talk about it in direct way, but this is the context of what I'm talking about here today. So I raise these kind of questions. So disability in crisis. So how can we make political ethical intervention? In other words, we imagining different ways of knowledge and activism. And when we think about this question, for me, disability really matters. What kind of roles does disability play in this context of crisis? Well, how can we disrupt and recreate disability politics? As I said, I don't have answer for that, but I would say I have several. Yeah, in Japan, there's a history of disability activism, and they have a wisdom. So yeah, of course, I don't have answer, but I have a lot of materials to think about it. So today I'm gonna share some of the history of disability activism here in Japan and Toronto, and then we can talk about it together. So I'm gonna start from my book in 2023 and based on my doctoral thesis. So actually, I gotta set up these kind of questions. So I'm kind of, as I told you, I'm based in Tokyo suburb and I engaged in the disability activism. Actually, I was a university student in the Tokyo suburb and I needed food and money. So that's why some of my friends invited to the community. And then I just started kind of assistance for not for activism part, but not for the money and food that I need to survive. But step by step, I engage in the activities. I learned a lot of wisdom, and also there's a lot of legends there, and they told their own kind of stories that bring me to the disability studies. That is the broader context of my research. And then, but at the same time, there's a lot of both kind of possibility and difficulties. And for example, these days we have kind of neoliberal social policies. And some disability activists are mobilized into these systems. So that is what people really talk about it. So that's why I said a question, how has the disability community has been mobilized by the neoliberal social policy? But also I would say, yes, also, I love Michel Foucault, so where there's a power, there's a resistance as well. So that's why I want to think about it. How can the disability community bring people together and create a space where you can think and act differently through music? So drawing on this kind of community-based research or archives, I mean everything in Tokyo suburb, I describe history and current situation of community activism led by disabled people, family, care workers, and supporters. That is my first work. So I'm showing you a kind of picture. It is held in community education facility in Tokyo suburbs. And there's about 10 to 15 people are working in that community space. Maybe there's a person who is playing music with piano and drums, or they're working and describing circles. But I really love the two children, and they are really good at digress. So they digress the circle, and then they are playing the drums. I think for me, they are children, but the picture is taken from it was taken I think 10 years ago. So now people here become good adult, I think. So I analyze these how these community are mobilized into the system and also create a space. That is my analysis. But firstly, so I just drawing on the archives and then describe how social and political context both constrained and produce stability community. As I told you, around the 2000, the door become opened to civil society. Like some civil society organization can start can become a welfare service provider, which is prohibited in Australia. That can be chance, but at some time, some activists became a welfare service providers. That's why some organization lost the kind of political view. So, I mean, I would say neoliberal social policy deprived I would say so. The neoliberal social policy change sometimes, deprive the political sense, but also produce the community. For example, in this case, the neoliberal policies change. I mean, closing school on Saturday deprived disabled children of public spaces and shifted the burden of care onto the community, and particularly mothers. However, it created an opportunity for the emergence of the disability community. So I would add some context. In Japan, around 1990s, the school was open to 6 days, I mean, Monday to Saturday, but some neoliberal policy wanted to close the, school because it takes a lot of money. And also some labor union tries to close the, school on Saturday because what they wanna working condition better. But at the same time, some disabled mother got angry because, yeah, what about children's stability? In the time 1990s, there's not enough welfare service, and so mother should have to take care of children, and also schools is really important for children because in the long history, disabled children are not allowed to enter a public school. That's why school has specific, really important meaning. That's why some mothers try to make against this neoliberal policy change, but at the same time, it is a kind of huge change. They cannot win. That's why they started a community. So, I mean, community activism is kind of both create both difficulty and possibility. But if you see the current situation, yeah, music can be really good because disability is in general, disability is understood as a kind of deficit, but the music situation, of course, in people can produce music more kind of improvisational way. For example, in the score, if you cannot read the score, if you cannot sing in a right tone, yeah, it is bad thing. But in this community, it is not a kind of bad thing, but it's more like an improvisation and stability can be reimagined. So that is my work. I mean, I need kind of nuanced way to talk about disability community. That is my work. And also, here, I'm showing a picture of my mentor who is a disability activist in Tokyo suburb. His name is Seijiro Amano. Yeah, the picture, so the picture describing that he's in his house, participating in my class through Zoom. He has short silver hair, wearing brown glasses and a red shirt in his electric wheelchair, smiling to me. We're behind him, laundry and jackets hanging on hooks, and they are self-stacked. So yeah, he's living just 5 minutes away from a university. So if you embedded in network, I mean, there's a lot of people I met, and then I became a personal assistant for him, and he is a kind of legend in disability activism. So he taught a lot of things to me, and I would share some of the actions that he made when he was a university student. And this gives me a lot of insight. He's a really interesting man. So he was born in 1995 and he entered university in 1975. And I would say 1970s, there was a lot of radical disability activism like deinstitutionalization, the kind of transportation accessibility. But when he was a university student at that time, he did a kind of different and I would say more radical types of disability activism. Strangely, so as a disabled student, he make a claim or make against claim that the university's decision to set a wheelchair ramp. So he's a wheelchair user. So I think in general, he needs a kind of wheelchair ramp, but strangely, he made it, he disagreed with the university's decision to make a wheelchair ramp. It sounds a little bit strange, but he has his own logic. So his logic is that access is community rather than system. So interestingly, in the university, he said, so for example, when wheelchair user try to go second floor with stairs, students help them to lift the wheelchair. So that's why, community is the access. And also, if the ramp is built, maybe the ramp tends to be set up in a hidden space where there's no student around there. That's why it can be more dangerous. And also, he went to a special needs high school. So that's why university is first time for him to meet various people, including non-disabled people. In that sense, friendship or community is really important for him rather than the kind of system, virtual around. And also he said, of course, we now have nothing about that. That's what he said. It is not the university, but student that decides student life. And also he adds some, as he has kind of radical perspective, he says, the building wheelchair ramp can be an excuse for raising student fee. And this breaks the student mutual relationship. Yeah, logic can be a little bit complicated, and for now it can be really kind of stolen. But I would say now we have a lot of this justice, or we say, go beyond inclusion, go beyond access. But he, in 1970s, have had this kind of logic. That's why I loved this story. And that's why as I said, I don't have answer for this current situation, but a lot of people have knowledge, and we can inherit some of these stories that I want to say. And also, this is the second section of presentation. I have those kind of Japanese contexts here, and then I meet the Tangled Art plus Disability. Actually, I'm really embarrassed because we have Eliza who named the Tangled as Tangled, but I really appreciate that Eliza connected to this place. And I would describe what is Tangled. I think this is quote from the homepage, and this is the sentence that Eliza make, but a tangled is not a knot. It can be undone or remain happily tangled. Tangles are messy and imperfect, but they are also complex, intricate, organic, even deliberate. Tangles represent what this organization does. We bring together all kinds of people and practice. So when I heard this sentence, it really resonated with my experience in Tokyo suburb because as my mentor says, or as my book describes, disability can be reimagined in different contexts. So that's why this sentence really struck me. And also, I would say, how can disability be reimagined through access, art, and disability justice? This is both my question and Tango's question, I think. So, I mean, if you wanna make access, you have to be politicized that way, but sometimes politics radical politics sometimes can be too strict to exclude someone. That's why you need art to talk about disability in a more nuanced way. I mean, access, art, and disability justice are combined together to produce these to reimagine disability. But I have this kind of theoretical thinking, and then I'm gonna go through some of the art practice of Tangled art here. So before moving to the art itself, I want to describe the artist. So here we have artist statement by Sarah Sproul. So I will read it out. Sarah Sproul's work critically examines identity, disability, and the body. exploring the myth of permanence and our collective fear of change through sculpture and installation, using materials such as ceramics, plaster, and latex paint to depict abstracted bodies in motion. She captures the tension between durability and decay, mirroring how queer, disabled, and fat bodies exist in flux within a world that demands stability. Working with found objects and casting processes, Sproul dismantled, reforms, and reimagined domestic objects to rewrite their histories, allowing gravity, change, and failure to shape the outcome. Drawing from the ghost story and the aesthetic of horror, she examines repression through the lens of religious control, disrupting the supposed safety of domestic spaces to expose cultural fears of bodily and spiritual transformation. So bearing that in my mind, I just picked up one of Sarah's work here. We have picture of the Sarah's work titled Here We Both Are. So I will read it out, image description, and offer some of the context to understand Sarah's work. And this is written by Tangled Art Disability and with Sarah. So here we both are. Here we both are consist of 10 circular medallion-like sculpture arranged in 5 rows of 2. Each 9-inch medallion is cast in plaster and painted with white interior wall paint so that surface, texture, and shadow become the primary visual anchors. The work features ripped wave-like textures that pull towards the center, where 2 ceramic, what do you say? Cherubic, thank you. Cherubic faces press gently against one another, framed by small angel wings. Across the columns, the depth of the medallion subtly increases and decreases, creating a visual rhythm of emergence and submergence, a motif that artist refers to in her tour as bodies, either emerging or being swallowed, depending on where the viewer stands. So we take a little bit time after I describe this kind of image description, but let's go to next slide. And here we have a picture of one of the medallion of Sarah's work. So I will read it out. The giraffe's figures come from a mold inherited from the artist's grandmother, who was a ceramist specialized in slip casting. The angels in Here We Both are cast separately and pressed by hand into the plaster once it reaches the consistency of soft serve ice cream. This timing allows the material to form natural waves, ridges, and edges, depending on temperature, humidity, and how the plaster settles in the cake pan used to mold for each piece. The decision to cast these pieces in actual cake pans introduced a domestic, almost humorous reference, little cakes, and the artist describes them. But beneath that sweetness lies a deeper tension running throughout the exhibition, the complexity of familial love and harm. The 2 columns represent 2 paths meeting at the center, a pair held together even as they are pulled apart or consumed by their surroundings. And I would add another context. In this slide, here we have picture some of the staff at Tangled is touching the Here We Both Are with vinyl wrap, and also staff is wearing headset which is connected to the device on the wall. The device on the wall has green bottom, and the device itself is colored in white, and which really fit with the wall and host atmosphere in the Tangled. You know, in Tangled, you can touch this kind of artwork because it's kind of the way of access. I mean, the touching the art is a different ways of experience art. In general art gallery, there are a lot of safeguards watching you don't touch, but you can touch it here. And also here is a kind of listening device. And I heard that this device can be printed in 3D printer, and this device is made by a disabled artist who has visual impairment. I mean, So if you visit the kind of classical music museum, you get a device which has a lot of buttons, and it is really expensive, I think. But here, the device is very simple and much resistance low atmosphere, and you can reprint the 3D by 3D printer, but it means it is not so expensive. That's why, DIY style, I believe this DIY style can be a kind of queer, this queer or anarchist way of, embodying archetypes. So here we have two pictures. On the left, we have the picture of one of the medallion, and on the left we have whole picture of the theory of work. So in order to honor the Sarah's work, and also I need some take a rest, so we can take a 2 minutes of time to take a rest or to grab some food or just honor the Sarah's work. Is that okay for you? Yeah, let's take a moment. I will set up.
If anyone arrives later, there's coffee and tea in the kitchen.
I would say I'm a materialist person, so snack is a very material condition of creative thinking. I really love that. But anyway, so yeah, I love Sarah's work because Sarah's work is really simple. As a researcher myself, I sometimes add things to describe sometimes context, or sometimes I add a lot of information to defend myself. But Sarah's work is more like a simple way of reducing the indifferent things. And this is, in my understanding, the ways how Sarah created a space where you can put into your story, or you can understand or interpret the way you are, the way you want. That is why I loved Sarah's experience. In that case, Sarah's work really demands me to engage with the work. I mean, Sarah's art himself doesn't talk about so much, but that is the Sarah's way to welcome you. That is my understanding. But yeah, we can exchange our interpretations after that. And also, lastly, I'm gonna talk about community archives in Tokyo suburbs. What I learned here in Toronto is how you love talking about community archives. So but I personally engaged with community archives. It is not limited to disability archives. It contains a lot of issues like disability activism and feminism and environmental pollution and anti-war activism. That's why I take up this community archive. So this is the called Citizens Archives Tama. So I will describe the Citizens Archive Tama. So I mean a little history of Citizens Archive Tama. March 22, 2002, Citizens Activity Center corner. It is built. It was from 1972 to 2002. A community education center run by Tokyo Metropolitan Government was abolished by the right-wing government. It is a kind of prehistory. So, I mean, 1970s, Tokyo had a kind of left-wing governor. That was great. So that's why Citizen Activity Service Corner was built to support a kind of community activity. That was good. But when we had a right-wing governor 2002, yeah, he just abolished it. That is the starting point. I mean, I would say community archives always suddenly have to start it from crisis. That is what I thought. But anyway, the fired stuff with community members started archives preservation movement and kept collecting materials issued by civil society organization. I would say the Citizens Activity Service Corner collected a lot of newsletters or zines or posters or all those things to preserve, experience. And also these zines and newsletters can be used for civil organizations to proceed their own activities. That's why the Citizens Activity Service Corner had a lot of materials. But once it is abolished, what about these, materials? And also, civil society organization is still going. So that's why you have to collect the newsletters or the kind of things, which is public, which has been published by civil organization. That is the starting point of civil society. That is the starting point of this community archives. But sometimes it is really difficult for community archives to hold a kind of resource or physical spaces to hold it. That's why November 2011, these groups, Citizen Archive, transferred part of its archival material to the university, which is called Archives for Environmental Research, the Ohara Institution for Social Research in Ohio State University. So I would say, so I said, Citizen Archive Service Corner is from 1972 to 2002. These materials which it collected is transferred to the university, and then Citizen Archive Summer has a material which is issued later than 2002. That is the situation. I mean, they divided the archives. Old one goes to university, and then they have whole new one. And that's why it allowed them to open their own spaces. That is the history of community archives. Now, the name, that's why we have the Citizen Archive Summer. So on the top of the slide, here's a logo of Citizen Archive Tama and the name of the Japanese name of Citizen Archive Tama. So Citizen is kind of, Citizen, and Archive has Archive. And Tama is kind of name on broader area, which refers to west side of Tokyo. So that is Simi Archives Tama. And I would describe the logo has pens and leaf. A leaf is kind of, I think, a leaf, and pens and leaves are this is kind of crossed like describing X. I would say, so pen means kind of exactly literature or material, primary sources. And olive refers to kind of intelligence or peace. Actually, peace is really important in Tokyo suburbs because in Tokyo suburbs, there was a US military, there was a huge US military basement and still have in another place. And also there's a self-defense forces basement. That's why, of course, peace in general is important, but in this context, peace is really important. So here we have the opening call for Citizen Archives Tamaso. I love this sentence, so I will read it out. We have newsletters, flyers, posters, leaflets, and booklet issued by various organizations and individuals. These mini communication media, minikomi, are issued as media for citizens. Minikomi is a kind of Japanese English. So you say mass communication, it's totally opposite. Mini is opposite mass, and komi comes from communication. So minikomi refers to we are not mass. I mean, we are critical of mass communication. We are more better in different context and radical activism. That's why I love. So we now use maybe you use kind of zine. No, doesn't matter. But for me, minikomi is I love the word minikomi, which really fit with my experience. But anyway, I will read it out. So the mini communication media, minikomi, are issued as media for citizens, minorities, or those who have encountered certain issues or problems. And they consist of hidden problems in daily life, information that tends to be overlooked, and thoughts of people who are often ignored. However, due to its format and the publishing distribution process, minikomi are rarely preserved and often dispersed. By adding citizen to the World Archive, which means a repository for public document or historical records, and naming it Citizens Archive Tama, we declare that we are a repository of minikomi, which is different from administrative document, and instead belongs to the community, civil society, as well as a place led by citizens themselves. So I mean, so this Citizens Archive Tama is archives for and by citizens. And also, I would briefly back to the slide, but actually, so, citizen are, or as I said, citizen activity service code, which is a pure history of citizen Archive, sounds like a little bit conservative, but its name has really meaning because as the citizens activity service corner was run by public, but they have the Tokyo governor don't want to use the kind of words movement or activism. But but actually, as the government don't know the actual kind of situation, a lot of staffs, especially the staffs are women and activists, secretly collected a lot of radical kind of newsletter, radical genes and newsletter, that kind of things. And also, as the staffs are not full-time, sadly, uh, they say they don't have a feeling of belonging to the organization or citizen service corner. That's why they have a more freedom to the way what they want to do. And there's an interesting story. So I was a research assistant in the Hosei University, and I find some of the books has a red sticker on the book, and but I don't know what it means. So I asked the members of the staff, what does it mean by it? And they say sometimes the police gonna visit the service center. That's why if the police visit the center, they hide the the book with red sticker. So that's why you can escape from surveillance. This is a way of survival. So in that sense, I mean, I'm just asking, what do you mean by the radical? That these activities can be understood a hidden way, or how can we be radical in different, well, kind of price? I don't have the answer, but I just want to add this kind of context. I will briefly just look through the example of archives. I don't want to dive into those things, but here's the newsletter of private institution in Tokyo suburbs. This is a black and white picture of the cover of a newsletter published by Fuji Gakuen from 1960 to 1981, a private unlicensed institution in Tokyo suburb. This picture draws 3 disabled people at the center and 2 care workers, activists on either side, all in front of the building with the phrase, "a place to live in everyone's hands." So as I said, in 1970s, there was a lot of radical disability activism, like the institution, or like my mentor. Actually, my mentor visited this place as well. But my mentor told this story. That's why I know this place. But I mean by this is actives in small institutions. That's why sometimes these actives is excluded from disability actives because institution is enemy. And also there's a lot of labor union which tries to improve the labor condition of care workers, but sometimes labor union criticize this small institution because they lack the kind of class consciousness. It's more like a community-based activity. That's why this small institution story tend not to be told in the mainstream discourse, in my understanding. But if you visit archive, we can have these kind of stories. And also, I love this thing, a Benikomi by a group of disabled people. This is the gene titled Don Quixote. Do you know that famous novel? Issued by 1985, March 28th. On the left page, there's a picture of a disabled woman who is breastfeeding. On the right page, there's a hard reflection of childbearing. Yeah, at that time, for disabled people, really, it is really difficult for them to have a child because, they are told that even though you don't take care of yourself by yourself, why you have children, that kind of thing. But here we have hidden story of these kind of things. And actually, the disabled woman in this gene and my mentor has been a friend since they were university students. That's why there's a lot of hidden story. But anyway, I mean, if you looking too deep in the community, there's a lot of wisdom which is not told in the mainstream. That's why I don't have answer, but I have some materials I can rely on. That is my argument. And lastly, I wanna briefly read an autobiography by two disabled women poisoned by arsenic. This black and white picture titled 6 Years of Old Wedding is taken from an autobiography of disabled women. This picture shows 2 disabled women on the right. They are disabled women with short hair, wearing wedding dress, sitting on the armchair and holding flowers with the author of the autobiography. On the left, there are the disabled women with short hair wearing a white tuxedo-like shirts, holding flowers, a better friend of the author. This is the autobiography by disabled woman, actually poisoned by arsenic. The author is Senno Masayo. She was born in 1954, and she got disabled after drinking arsenic containing powder milk when she was 10 months old. Oh, that's great. I forgot this. But anyway, if you're a child, maybe there you gotta, I don't know here in Toronto, but in Japan, especially old times, we gotta kind of powder milk to get a kind of good nutrition. But it was in the middle of 1950s, and Japan is experiencing kind of global economic growth. That's why sometimes factory which produce the powder milk is not good. That's why she powdered milk contains arsenic, and then she got disabled. That is her story. And also the autobiography was written from 2014 to 2015 as a milestone for her 60 years old birthday. I mean, age sometimes has important meaning in Japanese society. And the word, the autobiography is titled Sunfish. And the word sunfish is her nickname by which she embraces her own slowness and plumpness with humor. I don't want to go dive into that, but I would just want to describe some historical context. And there's a conflict between disability activism and the victimist movement. This is the excerpt from the history of huge book about victimist movement. And there's a conflict between radical disability activism. I would read it out, pride and cure. We, the victimist movement, are asking for returning our bodies to the state they were in before we were poisoned with arsenic. It is natural to try to cure and treat the after effects of arsenic poisoning. The idea that is discriminatory against disabled people to try to cure them or that society is to blame for everything is a way of abandoning our fellow human beings who are suffering and afflicted. So you can think of the dispute and social model of disability, like, radical disability movement. Yeah, try to be proud of themselves. That is one thing. But the victimist movement, I would say that some context, they use the word victim because they wanted to say there's the company or government that damaged their body. That's why, in this sense, victims is not a kind of, in my understanding, negative meaning, but victims is try to blame the kind of who does damage, who produced the disability. That is the sentence. But also there's kind of conflict, some radical disability politics say you have to proud of everybody, but victims movements say we are damaged. That's why we cannot take part in the kind of pride framework. That is the context between disability activism and this kind of environmental or food pollution movement. But in that sense, the author of biography doesn't belong to both sides because she don't belong to disability activism because she's more on the side of victims movement because she got a disabled or her impairment body is produced. But at some time, the victims movement sometimes had to draw a kind of rich boundary and they wanted to forge a more kind of identical activism. That's why she sometimes don't feel like joining the activism. That's why I would say that author of biography, I excluded both sides, but sometimes I focus on a kind of more on a material condition. I focus sometimes on a kind of history of activism. These personal life stories is excluded. So I'm asking that, what do you mean by the radical politics by forgetting or remembering anyone? That is my question. And life writing has a really good, important meaning for her. I mean, life writing can be read as a way of grip survival. I will read it out. I hated reading books by myself because I have poor eyesight and have trouble seeing fine print, much less kanji. The kanji character is like a Chinese alphabet, right? The kanji character with many strokes which appear as black circle, and so that I could not understand the difficult kanji characters. However, I was selfish and loved to listen to books being read to me, so I chose modern Japanese class to solve this problem. I was fascinated by the tales of Genji. This is a kind of classic, really classic novel. I think 1,000 years ago, written by the women, the tales of Genji. So I dedicated to study ancient Japanese as well. Also, when I wrote letters or long sentences, I always asked my mother or someone else to dictate what I wanted to say. I wanted to be able to write letters by myself, even if it took me a long time. I knew I couldn't dictate love letters, so I joined the Japanese typewriter club. I would a lot of context. For example, sometimes education for disabled people tend to focus on more on a vocational trade rather than this kind of language. But in this context, she tried to learn Japanese, although it might be really difficult. And sometimes writing can be her way to be kind of to get a space where she can be alone, or also writing can be a way to connect with other people. I mean, I don't have answer, but I would say, what kind of when we talk about archives, what is the context? What does the archives the mean for community? That is, I wanna highlight here. I'm sorry, Tali.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to let it, know that we only have a few more minutes.
Okay. Okay, so but this is my last part.
Okay.
As Eliza said, I'm a kind of translator of Alison Kiefer, and I love this Kiefer's argument of coalitional politics. And Kiefer cites Bernice Johnson Ligon's talk in the 1981 Woman Music Festival in Yosemite National Forest in the United States. I mean, when I feel some difficulty in my mind, I often read this citation. That makes me feel kind of more, not easy, but a little bit safe. I'm going through this right way. So this citation really gives you a lot of hint, I think. So I will read it out. I've never been this high before. I'm talking about the altitude. This is a lesson in bringing people together where they can't get enough oxygen. They're having them try to figure out what they are going to do when they can't think properly. I'm serious about that. There probably are some people here who can breathe because you were born in high altitude and you have big lung capacities. But when you bring people in who have not heard has the environmental conditioning, you got one group of people who are in a strain, and a group of people who are feeling fine are trying to figure out why you are staggering around. And that's what this workshop is about this morning. So drawing on Berenice Johnson Ligon's argument, Alison Kiefer describes that, Johnson really feeling breathing difficulty. Of course, Ligon uses breathing difficulty to describe how the coalitional politics is difficult, but at the same time, it is not only it is exactly her experience and breathing difficulty can be read as disability studies because breathing difficulty is kind of in way how the body can be impaired in this kind of environment condition. So I mean, this is really why I love this story is that in this situation, current situation, I have exactly I feel the breathing difficulty because the situation is difficult. But what Alison Kiefer describes that when you feel breathing difficulty, you are really trying to build a coalition of politics. That is the answer. And if you don't feel the breathing difficulty, it is not a coalition of politics. Yeah, again and again, I would say I don't have answer, but if you have breathing difficulty, as like me, maybe you are embedded in this coalitional politics of what is really hard. So that's why I love this. I love to say like this, rather than sharing hope, sharing difficulty is really important things in this kind of political difficulty. That is I want to say. And also, lastly, I just cite this excerpt, but through my presentation, maybe this breathing difficulty really resonates with what I'm discussing. Yeah. I ended up. Sorry about. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're coming up to the end of the hour. So I don't think we'll have time for like a hybrid question and answer period at this time. But if you have any questions or if you would like to get in touch with Aki, and also if you'd like to have a copy of the presentation, Aki generously said that he's willing to share that. Please feel free to email me. My email's in the chat. You can also get in touch with me through the Eventbrite messaging system if you registered that way. But yeah, thank you everyone so much for coming today. It was really a pleasure. And thank you so much, Aki.
Yeah, thank you for patience. I'm really bad about time management, but grip time, I believe.
Yeah.
Disability studies gave me a lot of excuse. I would say. Thank you for that. And also, I would just lastly I really appreciate Eliza. Actually, Eliza and I met 2019 summer here exactly the place. And during the COVID, we made a contact through email, and then we can be connected. And then Eliza's effort like paperwork, a lot of things, make it possible for me to be here. So I want to say thank you. And Eliza, you're doing exactly the coalitional politics, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Aki, so much.